Now, for those of you that don't know me, or even those some of you that do, you may not know that I've actually been a Christian a really long time. In fact, early this month, I celebrated my 34th spiritual birthday. So I don't know about you, but I have definitely experienced the amazing highs that come with the journey of walking with God. And I've also experienced some of the lows that come with that same journey. But being a part of our family of churches, I've come to see that there really is nothing new under the sun. And like most big families and organizations, however you choose to see us, change can happen very slowly. But one of the changes that really encourages me is the slow but steady move towards talking about sexuality in church. And as a fairly hardcore scientist and a doctor, I myself have always been fascinated by the human body. The more I've studied it, and I've studied it a lot, and the more I continue to learn, the more I realize, particularly as women, how truly fearfully and wonderfully made our bodies are by the amazing God that we serve. So for myself, so often in church, however, I've been made to feel that my body and my sexuality are dirty or naughty or bad in some way, that it's a stumbling block for men, a stumbling block for other women, a stumbling block for me, something to be suppressed and dampened, or something of which I should be ashamed. Now, all of these things in some ways are actually can be quite true. But in fact, our bodies and our sexuality should be celebrated. Our bodies and our sexuality are physiological, it's anatomical, it's emotional, and it's spiritual. And it enables us to live life to the full in the context of God's very special plan for us. So whatever stage of life we're in at the moment, but I truly believe from a scientific perspective, from a medical perspective, but most importantly, from a spiritual perspective, that God has given us our sexuality as a gift. And even when it feels like a burden, and certainly to someone like me, who has been pretty much single for 34 years, it can often feel like a burden. But I also believe that the damning silence around sexuality feeds into that. And I also truly believe that more discussion about sexuality, more understanding, more demystifying of such topics is one of the answers to relieving some of this burden. And so that is why I am truly encouraged, excited, inspired, and relieved to be able to welcome you all to tonight's special women's event, God, Women, and Sexuality, presented by our special sister and amazing friend, Jennifer Konzen, who's very well qualified to speak about this topic. And I'll leave Amy to tell you all the reasons why when she introduces Jennifer. But for now, I welcome you. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts to thinking about things differently. I encourage you to do the thinking and praying work to help shift the narrative around God, women, and sexuality to a celebration of God's gifts and his enduring love for us as women. So at this time, Maria is going to pray for us and pray for the evening.
Hi everyone, I'm Maria. I'm from the East and I'm going to be praying for us right now. So if you guys want to join me in bowing your heads. Dear God, Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much that we can just come together, God, that we can come together and learn about you, God, and us as women and our sexuality, God. God, thank you. This time together is really precious, and I'm so grateful and excited to be here. Thank you that despite whatever's been happening in our weeks, that we can just come before you and learn about you and how you've made us, God. God, I really pray for your guidance for tonight, God, and for your love to really show through, that you just really be with us tonight as we learn and discuss about you and sexuality, God. I pray that you be with Jennifer as well, and help us to really, learn so much from her knowledge and her wisdom. God, you have given us so much so much beauty and depth in your creation. And God, we know that sexuality is a difficult topic for many people. It's scary talking about something so vulnerable and personal, for many of the reasons that Claudine has already shared. And for many of us, God, there are just feelings of hurt and shame and fear. And God, I'm just so grateful that you are just a good God and that you love us so deeply. And I just pray that tonight can just really be a safe space, that it can be a place where we can ask our questions and just really seek your truth, God. I pray that you soften our hearts and help us to be receptive. I pray that you can just help us and bring a time of healing for anyone in pain, God, or anybody carrying hurt with them, God. Yeah, please be with Jennifer as she speaks. We're so grateful to have her and so grateful for all her knowledge and wisdom and work that she's been doing, God. And yeah, please be with us tonight. We love you so much. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're now gonna have a song, which is a spiritual song called Shine Your Light, and it's performed by the ICOC church in LA called South Bay. It's a call and response song, and it's really got a heart of lifting each other up. So please join in if you can, and if you'd like to. Thanks.
2, 3, 4. Looking at the world, you could sure feel small.
Looking at the world, you can sure feel small.
Thinking that you can't make a difference at all.
Thinking that you can't make a difference at all.
Don't sit back and say, what can I do?
Don't sit back and say, what can I do?
Start with what you see right in front of you.
Start with what you see right in front of you.
Do what you can, make a difference. Spend the distance, shine your light. Healing the hurting as we go. We will bring hope, changing lives. Telling the hearts feeling sorrow that
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, good evening. I see that we are coming from every single part of the continent. Thank you so much for logging in and taking a bit of your time to be here with us. My name is Amalia Legon, and I am here serving in East London part-time. And welcome to our event. I love being here, part of the church here, and I'm so grateful for the women who put together this event, who organized this event. But also, I'm grateful to all the women that are working behind the scenes right now to make this event run smoothly as possible. And we are so happy to have this special guest with us, Dr. Jennifer Konzen. Thank you so much. It is a privilege to be able to introduce you to all of us. Dr. Jennifer Konzen has a doctorate in psychology in marriage and marriage and family therapy, a licensed family therapist, a certified sex therapist, a mother of 4. She has a specialized training in certain areas of therapy as well, like chemical dependency counselor, training in eating disorder, and also play therapy. She's a certified sex therapist with the American Board of Christian Sex Therapists. She is also nationally award-winning researcher, an international speaker, and also an adjunct professor at Alliant International University, San Diego, and Bethel Seminar, San Diego. She is also the author of some books. We will put some of her books at the end, but I just want to mention The Art of Intimate Marriage, Redeemed Sexuality, Graduated Intimacy, a guide intervention for increasing sexual intimacy in marriage. She will be speaking for us. And afterwards, we will have a time of Q&A. I want to encourage you. I will try to share my screen so you will see. Not now. I will post in the group chat. The Slido code is God and Women. And as Dr. Konzen will be speaking for us, we do want to encourage you to go on slido.com, introduce this code, God and Women, and you're able to write down your questions as they come to you. I can already see that there are some questions already posted in there. And people are still posting. So also, I just want to remind everyone, this is a recorded event. And I know maybe for some of you, this can be a very vulnerable topic. So on Slido, you can post questions anonymously. And also, yeah, if you would love to ask a question, you can also ask a question in the chat. So without further ado, Dr. Konzen, thank you so much for coming. We are eager to listen to you this evening.
Well, goodness, how fun. And it is lovely. I love seeing all your faces. And if you wouldn't mind, even if you're just listening, briefly turning on your face so we can see everybody's faces, or as many as can. It's totally okay if you can't. But I know personally, I really like it when I can look at the faces I'm speaking to. It's just such a new world. Oh, there's some more faces. Lovely. Thank you. You can go back. But it's so good to see everyone, even just briefly. You're from all over. And also I'd love it if you put in the chat, where are you from? I'd love to know where I'm speaking to. So put that in the chat. Where are you either from now? Where do you live? But maybe if you were in a different country growing up, I'd love to know that too. And then also, I would love to know who's heard me speak on sexuality before. Just stick your thumbs up if you go down to the reactions and put your hand gesture with a thumb up on there, that just kind of lets me know my audience, where you're from, how many of you heard me more before, because if a lot of you have heard me before, then you're going to get a little bit of a repeat tonight. And so there's some of you. Gotcha. Okay, that's very helpful. Yeah, we got a raised hand there. Super. Thank you. So actually, a few of you haven't heard me, so that's kind of fun. Wonderful to be with you. They they were asking, are you excited about tonight? And when I've got something on my calendar, I'm like, oh, that'll be good. I see it there. It's coming, right? But it's usually like the last day or two. So like the last day or two, I've been looking at it going, oh, good. I'm so excited. I'm just excited to be with my sisters from all over the world. So I'm excited that I got asked, and I'm happy to be with you here today. It is fun. I do teach this to men and women. I do teach it to married groups. But I do have a special love when I can just be with the girls, because there is a certain level of things that I share with the girls that I might not share if it's a mixed crowd. It's a similar lesson I teach if the men are joining, but so I just like being with the girls. I am going to go ahead and share my screen, and we're going to jump in. I want to warn you, I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to move quickly. You're going to see a lot of material today. I am going to send my slides to the powers that be that are running this. You will get them afterwards, so you will have them to do whatever you want with them. But I'm going to cover a lot because I don't ever know, am I going to get to see this group again? If not, I want to give them as much as I can. So I tend to overload. Just saying, here comes the fire hydrant. I'm going to give you a fire hydrant of information before we jump into the Q&A. God, Women, and Sexuality. I taught this lesson for the first time in LA about 7 years ago, I want to say. It was such a joy, and it's been a joy since. But what's fun is it's gotten flavored with different things through the years. So there's some similarity if you've heard something like this before, but with all kinds of new fun things. This is who now all lives in San Diego. All of my children have returned to San Diego briefly, moving back. Actually, 2 of them just came back from Europe. No, 3 of them just moved back from Europe. So these 4 of them are my blood children. 1 is by marriage. I have another by marriage, but he hasn't made it onto the picture yet. So what is it we love about the pictures where they're walking away and you see their backs? I don't know, but I like those. So this is them walking on the beach here in San Diego. So I love my kids. It's a blast. So some of them are actually not far from where I'm sitting right now. This is what we're going to cover today. We're going to talk about a spiritual view of sexuality. We're going to talk a little bit about development, and we're going to hit on redeemed singlehood. We need to redeem singlehood in our fellowship. We're going to talk about what does it mean to pursue holiness, how to have intimate relationships, like how to expand our intimacy skills, honestly, and then how to live richly and fully in the bodies that God has given us. And then a final thought on our foundation. So this is actually from my book, Redeem Sexuality. A lot of today you'll find in that book. You are a sexual person. God created them, male and female. As a teen, campus student, single professional. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. Let's go. Older single married woman, divorced or widowed woman from conception. God, the master artist, created you as a sexual being. So how do you live out your sexuality in a way that's honoring to God? And what is sexuality? Is it just intercourse? Or is it perhaps something much greater? So let's talk about that. My main purpose in starting with this is you are a sexual being. God created you that way. Now, how do we live it out in a way that's honoring to him? So I do want to start off with just getting our foundation biblically. So what is a spiritual view of sexuality? This is my take on my understanding of a spiritual view of sexuality. I hope you go get yours. You go do your study. The very first time I taught a message on sexuality, it was to the married women here in San Diego, one of our regions. And I took a year to prepare it. I was myself just becoming a therapist. So this was 19 years ago. And I mean, it's such a sticky topic. I didn't want to mess it up. So I took a year. I read the book, Sex and the Supremacy of Christ. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And I then looked up every single scripture on sexuality, got my concordance out and literally looked up every single one. Then in the middle of my doctorate, I was so inundated with so much stuff on sexuality from the secular world that I did it again. I've just like, I'm going to do this, like, look at it so thoroughly. The majority of scriptures biblically on sexuality are on what not to do. They're on sexual sin. The ones that are on how sexuality should be are really sex positive. So I'm going to give you a mixture of that understanding. Go do your own deep dive. If this is something you haven't done before, most people haven't actually, go do your own deep dive. So just taking a glance at Ezekiel 16 and 23, God is speaking to the nation of Israel, and he uses all of these really detailed sexual terms to talk about them. He says, you know, I want you to live and flourish. You are mine. And then he starts talking about Israel in really sexual terms. And he starts using the language of adultery to describe them, because Israel as a nation has been committing idolatry. So he starts using this sexual language, and he uses it. Sexuality, you can see here, he uses these terms because he wants us to know him. And this is how we see this in everything. God uses the physical to explain himself, right? The rocks cried out. I mean, I live on 10 minutes from the ocean, and the waves, when they crash, right? God is shouting. I grew up in Colorado with mountains and mountain streams. I mean, the gorgeousness, right? Beauty of nature shouts God. So God used it, and then he, of course, incarnated himself into Jesus, into a human body. So God uses the physical to explain the spiritual. And so he does the same thing with the sexual. He uses the sexual to explain the spiritual. We often think that it's like God's over here and sexuality's over here, and those two things should never meet. You know, the book that I first read, God and the Sex and the Supremacy of Christ, while I was learning it, getting ready to teach from it, I had teenagers. The book would kind of be left out. We had a very active house, and people would see it and go, what is that about? You know, sex and the supremacy of Christ. You don't put Jesus and sex in the same sentence. I mean, we do this, like God's over here and sex is over here, but actually the Bible doesn't do that. So I want to show you. So in Ezekiel 23, this is how vivid the language is. He says, in that land, their breasts were fondled, their virgin bosoms caressed. She gave herself as a prostitute. Look at the highlighted words. During her youth, men slept with her, caressed her virgin bosom. He talks a lot in these two chapters, 16 and 23, about breasts and bosoms and caressing their bosoms. He poured out their lust upon her. She lusted after her lovers. Now listen to this line. It's just like, whose genitals were like those of donkeys, and whose emission was like those of horses. I mean, have you seen a horse's genitals? I mean, they're large and it's weird. Like, why is this even in here? He's using this really vivid language, the lewdness of your youth, again, the bosom being caressed thing, right? Why? He's not even talking about actually sexuality here. He's addressing the nation of Israel and their idolatry. And he's using this language. Why? So I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I work a lot with couples where there's been some kind of infidelity, either pornography or an affair. So lots of betrayal will come into my office, right? And it is either the pain that's been created. Some of you might have that story in a relationship you've been in or are in, the pain that's created, or it's the fear of that. Their mom, their dad did, and there's the fear of that happening in their marriage. God uses our understanding of the pain of betrayal and says, this is how I feel when you worship other gods. He literally lets us into his heart by using sexual language to show us something about himself. Amazing, right? So sexuality isn't God over here and sex over here. It's literally the language he uses multiple times. This is just one example to express his heart, right? God wants us to know him, and he uses physical language to do that. What's really amazing is the word that's used, like, for example, in Matthew for intercourse. So Joseph did not gnosko Mary till she gave birth to Jesus. Okay. This word gnosko, it's one word. In your translation, it might say he didn't have relations with her. So they use all kinds of different translations for this word, but it's one word, and it means to know. And it's the same word that's used in John 10. I know the sheep and the sheep know me. I know the Father and the Father knows me. It's a really intimate passage in John 10 about how God knows us deeply. We know his voice. He's talking about the shepherd and the care, but he literally uses the same word to describe, I know the Father. Jesus is speaking. I gnosko the Father, and the Father gnoskos me. He uses this word that means, I mean, how well do Jesus and God know each other? Like Jesus is God. So, so deeply, intimately, completely, right? That's exactly the word he uses to describe sex between Joseph and Mary. Not because what we have with God or what Jesus and God have is sexual, because this deep, intimate, knowing word is what he uses to describe the physical act of intercourse between a rather famous couple. Why? Because that's God's intent for erotic sexuality, that it not be about just intercourse, that it be about a deep, intimate knowing between two people. So it's just important that we even place the act of sexual intercourse in this bigger, I call this the overarching teaching on sexuality, as far as physical, erotic sexuality, that God's intention is that it be about this word. Well, what's really fun is it's the same, similar, different language used in the Old Testament. So in Genesis, now Adam yada Eve, his wife, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. It's the same word that's used in Jeremiah 31, where it says they will know the Lord. They will yada the Lord. Again, this is, if you do a deep study on the word yada, you can read Glenn Giles' paper on it. It's beautiful. It's a experiential knowledge. This isn't just, cognitive. This is, I know deeply, right? Again, he's using this word with another famous couple. Well, this is, of course, previous, Adam and Eve. So God's intention for erotic sexuality, this is, of course, speaking to intercourse specifically, that it's about this deep, intimate knowing, and he bases it in this idea of the deep knowing of him, right? And then how does that overlap? This is what's really cool, is when you look at this word, gnosko, in the New Testament, you find it all over. But in Romans 1, God gave them over in the sinful desires of their hearts to sexual impurity for the degrading of their bodies with one another. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie, since they did not think it worthwhile to retain the what? Gnosko of God. He gave them over to a depraved mind to do what ought not to be done. So I'm actually taking Greek right now, and I've been pronouncing it wrong the whole time, because I've been pronouncing it wrong for 19 years. It's actually gnosko. So they did not find it worthwhile to retain the gnosko of God. So when we don't stay deeply, intimately connected to God, it messes up our sexuality. Like, we know this at face value. It says it again in 1 Thessalonians 4, the heathen who do not gnosko God give their bodies to sexual immorality. So our knowledge of God, our gnosko of God, actually guards and guides our sexuality. I get asked, and those of you who sent questions in a while ago for this workshop, many of you asking about how to steward, how to guide, how to live out your sexuality if you're not married. But I would say the answers I would give to that are the same for a married person, as far as knowing God guards and guides our sexuality. So, and this word here doesn't mean just, again, this head knowledge, like read your Bible, go to church. This is the deep, who is he? I've been through a bit myself through the years. This was alluded to in Claudine's and her sharing. You guys have your stories. It's been I call these last 3 years my Job years. It's been really hard. And it is that deep knowing of God that just grounding, right, that we have with God. Well, I've had to work hard at that through the years. Like I had a sister ask me, she said, Jennifer, you talk a lot about knowing God as being so important to your walk, like knowing who he is and knowing his character and his heart. What's helped you do that? This was a couple of years ago. And I was like, such a good question. What has helped me? And it made me go through my own like process through the years ago, pulling out my Thompson chain. Like I was a young Christian. This is probably like 30 years ago. And looking up in the Thompson chain, God, and it had like a whole page of all of words describing his character. And I remember taking forever to study that. I had done it again, probably about 15 years later. Well, this young sister asking me this question made me think, I'm going to do that again. Well, that's been my last 6 years. I spent about 2 years in the character of God. I spent 2 years in the character of Jesus in the Gospels. And then I spent the last 2 years in the titles of God and in the affection, love, and encouragement of Jesus. So like about the last 6 years, just on who he is. I'm not saying you have to spend 6 years studying the character of God, but I am saying do whatever it takes to deepen your who he is. I feel like a new Christian, to tell you the truth. I just feel like I'm having so much fun doing new things in my deepening of who God is. So I want to encourage you, expand what that idea means. That is the root of everything we're going to talk about today. Our deep knowing of who God is will guard and guide our sexuality. What else does the Bible teach about sexuality? There's actually all kinds of other words, and they're fun words. In Proverbs 5, he's talking about the women's breasts, his wife's breasts. May you ever be intoxicated with her love, it says. And this word intoxicated, so he's talking about their sex life. And this word literally means reeling around drunk. You know, that when it comes to, again, erotic sexuality, so this is really alluding to orgasmic release, that this is how sex in a marital relationship should be. Those of you who are single, well, those of you who are married may look at this scripture and go, well, that'd be nice. That's not happening in my marriage. And those of you who are married are thinking, oh, that's what's going to happen in my marriage. And the married people are going, well, good luck with that. Like the reality is, it's often not happening in our married talks. I'm doing a marriage retreat in 5 days in Spokane, Washington. And it is one of the things I actually spend a good chunk of the marriage retreat educating on the problems. There's a lot of challenges with sexuality. However, what's important to note here is God's intention, again, for erotic marital sexuality, is that it literally is like, so amazing. That's God's intention. 1 Corinthians 7 uses the word Peru. He says that this young man who is engaged to be married, if he is burning with passion for her, and the word there is Peru, then he should get married. And so this word, so Peru, this fire is what it means. Where is he supposed to feel this fire? Take it into the marital relationship. So it's really important. That's God's intention for, again, erotic sexuality. Sexuality means a lot of different words, but this particular part is the erotic acting out orgasmic piece. Take it into the marital relationship. Proverbs 5, this is one of my favorites. It uses, well, and Song of Solomon 4, it uses all of these water terms: cistern, fountain, spring, well, flowing river. So God's intention, again, is that it be this continually flowing, refreshed stream, right? The Bible actually is, yes, the majority of scriptures on about what not to do, but when it does speak about erotic sexuality, how people might physically engage in sex, the Bible is very sex positive. It's important to note that because people have this idea that God's negative about sex. Actually, the Bible is the only world religion text that included an entire book on sensuality and sexuality. God is very sex positive, right? Yeah, there's my point. So the thing is that whether you are physically engaging in sex or whether you've been single your entire life and are not physically going to orgasm, things affect how you view sexuality, how you view yourself as a sexual person, and how you've interacted with sexuality through the years. Whether you've been engaged in sexuality, married or not, whether you're married and engaged in sexuality or not, there are a lot of things that influence how you think and feel and have experienced sexuality. So I call this the development of sexuality. Very, very big piece. What influences how you think and feel about sexuality? Well, a lot of it is your family upbringing. There's just a lack of healthy stewardship in families and in our ministries. It's been already alluded to today. The lack of talking openly in families, and I mean even spiritual families, is actually more problematic than anything else. In my own research, I took, I studied a group of women and their experiences growing up, and I looked at their view of shame in connection with sexuality. And every single one of the women connected the lack of talking about sexuality in their families to experiences of shame with sexuality. So the taboo nature, and it's not just in our physical families, it's in our spiritual families, right? The lack of talking is really problematic. Or if a young child, I just had a client yesterday share this, they were masturbating, their parent walked in and said, "Don't do that," and then walked back out. And that was it. I had another woman in my research study. She and a friend were exploring each other. Mom walked in, stood there kind of frozen, walked back out. Later that evening said, "So if you have any questions, you can ask me." And the participant in the study said to me, "I thought, I would love to talk about that," but it wasn't an open conversation, right? So family responses, either rejecting or shaming or just ignoring sexual exploration or questions or touching, absolutely affects how you view sexuality now. Your parents' views on sexuality, maybe they continually made negative views. Maybe they made lewd jokes. Maybe they were really promiscuous and literally did things sexually right in front of you. Maybe you were touched by, not just parental, by the way, extended family, their views on attitudes on sexuality, not just sexuality though, and the body. So the comments made about the physical body have a huge impact. Negative comments about weight, about "you're kind of skinny, oh, you're developing really nicely there, you should kind of take off some pounds," like whatever those comments are growing up, that affects your view of your body. Or maybe they never said it to you, but it was happening all around you. Mom constantly dieting, dad constantly going and working out, or mom constantly working out. Like the focus on the body, that this is how a body should look. It affects not only how you view your body, but it affects what you call body consciousness in the midst of sexuality, or about how people just feel like people view them, right? Big time affects, and we're going to talk about that. How did your family do with puberty? Most women will tell me that they learned about puberty from their sisters. Their moms didn't talk to them about it, or their friends. They went and bought their bra, with another family member. Mom just couldn't do it, right? No talking about how puberty then increases the amount of sexual arousal in the body, all those hormones flooding. Boys are having nighttime emissions, what they call wet dreams. Girls actually have the same, they'll have sexual responses in the middle of their dreams. I have a lot of women who will say, "Is that sin?" No, that's actually just your body responding to a sexual signal. It happens in the middle of a dream. You can talk to people about it, but there's not like a control you can have of it. But the thing is that parents and families don't talk about sexual arousal for men or women, or about how the body's changing, periods, hair growth in the different pubic areas and so on. And, I became a therapist in the midst of my kids being teenagers. And as I started teaching more on sexuality, I asked my kids, so how did I do? On talking about this as you were growing up. We talked very openly when they were young. I kind of thought, dad will take care of it I have 3 boys, and I didn't really talk with my boys as they became teenagers, going through thinking, that might make them uncomfortable. I did it when they were earlier. And I was the one comfortable talking about it, and I should have. So one of my sons said to me, I asked him, how did I do? And he literally, we were getting out of the car, we were walking, and he just stopped and he kind of looked at me and he started crying. Even thinking about it, I get emotional. And he said, Mom, it was hard. I was waking up. I didn't know what was going on. Didn't you see those tissues everywhere? Like, why didn't you talk to me? He goes, I felt so much shame. And I was like, I'm standing there in my driveway going, oh, I'm so sorry. Right. So I didn't talk about sexual arousal with my boys. Now they do. They ask me questions now. I've repented, but I mean, we do have to learn how to comfortably talk about the body. We're going to hit that some more today. What were the examples like in your family? Especially to any kind of dehumanizing or exploitative sexuality. If you were exposed to pornography really on, I'm going to tap on that a bit later, but it really influences how you view sexuality. It's dehumanizing. Pornography is dehumanizing and exploitative. And so it influences the way someone views themselves, views sexuality, what arouses them, all the negative views of self they might have, or early arousal systems get turned on. It influences all kinds of things in those young years that used to be where the early exposure was like 12, 13. Now it's 7, 8 is the common age of exposure. So obviously we need to guard our kids' exposure on whatever devices they're on. They're probably going to get exposed. My own, I came home from work one day and from something one day, and I go on the computer. My kids are not yet home from school, and I didn't even, this was early in my even understanding the internet, and I click on to search for something, and down drops recent searched history, and I see Charger cheerleaders. Chargers is our football team, and then I see BAJINA. Vagina. And I thought, either my husband's really struggling and just not sharing, and is having spelling problems, or I have a young boy in my family who's looking at vagina. Well, it was my boy, and we ended up having the best talk about it. They get exposed even when you try to protect them. And so having good talks about it is just so key. So the lack of talking is more problematic. The other thing with family upbringing is if you've had any sexual abuse or any sexual trauma, 2 years old, 4 years old, 8 years old, 16 years old, by a direct family member, by a neighbor, by a sibling, it impacts how you view sexuality. That trauma can continue. I work with a lot of people who are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and they've still got some symptoms they're working through. But actually what's more problematic, not is just the sexual trauma that happened, but the family's response. Uncle so-and-so touches 8-year-old, 6-year-old, and she tells grandma or mom or dad, and they don't believe her, or they're like, uncle would never do that, or what were you wearing, or well, just don't sit on his lap anymore, like some kind of disapproving response. That's actually more harmful than in some ways, than what happened. So, I tell parents, I had a family call me, they're the 2 cousins, one quite a bit older, one younger, touching each other. We're kind of panicked. What do we do? And I said, the best thing you can give is let's talk about it response, openly, believing them, having open conversations. So if that didn't happen to you, like you didn't get a safe, loving response, it affects things, right? Big time for some people. So talking openly, right, about sexuality is key. I love this silly slide. Am I glad to get that straightened out? Now I can go home and explain it to dad. So this is the teenager, middle schooler coming home from the sex ed class, and they've never talked, right? We got to change that picture. There's other things that also impact your development of sexuality, what you were exposed to online now with everything on the internet, media, movies, magazines, TV, learning from the media. I mean, the media portrays sex so crazy, right? When during the relationship, do most movies and TV show sex happening, right? When you're watching a movie, when do they have sex? When in the relationship? It's like the first date, always premaritally, right? So that, and when they have sex, it's always heavy panting and everybody's like up against the wall, and then clothes are flying everywhere and they're throwing themselves in the bed and they both have orgasms at the same time. Like, in case you're wondering, that's like not how it happens, but that's how it is in like every TV show, right? And there's this idea that that's how, when I do engage sexually, that's what it's going to be like, or that's what it should be like. And it's not. So something's wrong, right? And I'm in this married sexual relationship, ours isn't like that, or I'm thinking about getting married and I think that's how it's going to be one day. Obviously, pornography is really messed up people's views of sexuality, but honestly, just Disney, you know? So okay, on a minor way, but still, and then the TV shows and so on. So also online, you get this whole thing when it comes to like, if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. It is all over the internet. It's based on some really teeny research. I actually had someone teach it in a married workshop when I was early married. It was a gynecological doctor who said, who was in the fellowship, who said that it's true that if, sperm builds up and it isn't released, then blah, blah, blah. And I was like, and I wasn't a therapist then, I was long before I became a therapist, but as a therapist, I went and looked that research up like, it just sounded a little off, but I thought, I'm going to go look. There is like non-replicated studies that basically it comes down to when you have an orgasm. Number one, the whole releasing sperm thing, there's no foundation to that. As far as there's just not enough research and it's not been replicated. Number two, the biggest thing that's out there is when you do masturbate to orgasm, you get this flood or just have sex, you get this flood of chemicals in your body, oxytocin, dopamine, and it helps your mental health. You should, have an orgasm pretty regularly for your good mental health. If you don't use it, you're going to have poor mental health. That's based on the fact that yes, your body does all kinds of cool things when you orgasm, but actually oxytocin that's released, that's the biggest hormone that's released in when someone has an orgasm. It happens when you give hugs to someone. It's the cuddle hormone. When a woman breastfeeds, when people go hiking. I mean, oxytocin does flood the body during orgasm, but you actually get it from a lot of other things. You can have good mental health and not orgasm, in case you're wondering, because it's all over the internet that you're like not going to have good mental health. So yes, it's super fun and it feels really good, but you're not going to lower your mental health by not. Also, I get asked this when I'm doing just singles, and they'll say, I didn't have any sex, or I used to be sexually active and haven't had any for 10 years. Is it going to work when I get married again? That's such a fair question, right? Because we don't talk about it. And so all of a sudden you get married and you had like maybe a talk right before marriage. And it's the only time you discuss sexuality was like the week before your wedding. Let's please stop doing that. And you're supposed to like switch on and it's all going to work really great. Yeah, it doesn't work that way. And so there's this fear that if I don't use it, I'll lose it. I would say it's not an issue of the fact that you didn't have sex. It's really more of an issue is we don't talk about it openly. And so then we don't get to work through the sexual problems that may very well come up when you get married, not because you waited or stopped having sex when you became a Christian, but because we need to talk openly, right? And the body does change over time. That one's true. So we just need to be aware. Online sources do not portray things very well, and they give really false information, and we need to know that. But also just our portrayal of things within our fellowship really affects views of sexuality We tend to only address sexuality when sin's involved. Okay, so I was getting ready to teach at the Youth and Family Conference in Denver. This was probably 7-8 years ago, something like that. And I put in my title as how to teach about sexuality, how parents should teach about sexuality, how to talk to your kids about sexuality. That's what it was. How to talk to your kids about sex. And so I get there and I look at the program and it says how to teach your kids about sex and purity. And I was like, seriously, do we have to stick the purity word on there in order to feel good about talking about it? Can we just say how to talk about sex? And that happened again when I went to Orlando. I'm like, that is not my title. We just need to talk about sex instead of it has to be on, like, so when I was coming to Orlando, I said, hey, I contacted everybody teaching on sexuality, Widener's, Guy Hammond, myself, were kind of a lot of speakers. And then we were getting ready for Orlando. I said, hey, I'd like to do a sexuality track, not a same-sex track and not a purity track, a sexuality track that we're all on together. What do you think? Yes. Now they're all in support of that. I proposed it. We had this is before it all changed with COVID, but we had a same-sex track and a purity track. And I was like, whatever. So, right, we just have as a church body a problem with addressing sexuality in only certain realms. And then when someone is struggling with a sexual sin, we tend to have very shaming responses as if it's a different sin than when someone lies. And so we don't handle the confession of sexual sin well at all. We are stronger or more shaming in our language or more ignoring. We don't come back to it. We have shameful, ignoring can be just as shaming, or words that are shaming. And then you might have your own shame and guilt about your past, what you did last week, what happened to you that you did not do, but someone did it to you, right? And we don't give a place to talk about that. Someone gets baptized and boom, they're all better. And so all that stuff that happened beforehand, we don't need to talk about that, right? I can't tell you the number of women I work with where they've had multiple sexual partners before they became a Christian. And it was only talked about in terms of that was promiscuity and sexual sin. And then it was never talked about before. Most women who have multiple sexual partners have been treated terribly in those relationships. Their bodies have been objectified and used. They've been handed off. I had one woman tell me about how literally she was with the guy she was with. They're at a party and he literally says to the guy, you can have her tonight. And she's like frozen. She goes off with the guy. They have sex. And of course, that's her experience now for the next 20 years of that feeling of my body's not my own. I get handed off. Well, she'd never talked to anybody about that, right? Because she shouldn't have had sex that night. So we don't know how to talk about the shame and the guilt around sexuality. And we don't do a great job of just even that little bit that I did on spiritual view of sexuality. We don't do a good job of teaching sexuality as a body. We know, okay, so let me just go back to the idea of, for some of you, you engaged in sex outside of marriage, either premaritally or in an affair or postmaritally. And we do need to talk with someone and get help. And we need to really consider, if you're the one listening to someone share a choice or something that they did sexually, their challenges with pornography, maybe they've had challenges with pornography for 15 years or a year, or their first time last week, how we respond, are we really responding like God? If you look at the Old Testament, God literally, there's a scripture that says if they engage in sexuality before they're married, you take them outside the town and you stone them. It's both the man and the woman, by the way, but the God who wrote that, so God's very serious about sexual sin. That's why the majority of scriptures are on that. We don't have to lessen that seriousness, but the God who wrote that walked on stage in John 8. And Jesus, literally, a woman was brought before him And he said, I don't condemn you. Now he tells her, you need to leave your life of sin. So he confronts the sexual sin, but look how he does it. I don't condemn you. We need to respond like Jesus. God walked on stage in John 8. We cannot respond to people's sexual sin with the kind of shame that we have historically, right? It is serious and we need to help each other, but we need to change how we're responding. Whenever I go to that, just the words coming out of my mouth, God on stage, it just moves me because Jesus is so compassionate and that's who we're following, right? There's another chunk of things that affect how you view and practice sexuality. How has touch been in your life? Touch is so important. So the body is important. Touch is important. How was affection in your family? Maybe there wasn't any. Maybe you grew up always having a discomfort with touch. Your mom says that when you were a kid, you were like, ah, and you just pulled away from touch, right? Maybe you came to church and you're like, oh, these people that want to hug. And maybe even today you come to church and you're like, I'm going to come late so I don't have to hug as many people. Like discomfort with touch is a thing, and it may literally just be a part of who you are. And what do we do with that? Or you may feel the opposite, like you are single. When I was in Singapore, the older single women were just like, nobody hugs us. Like we miss being held. We miss waking up in the morning, being, in somebody's arms or getting to cuddle with someone. They were sexual before. Or they've been single their whole life. And I asked him if it was okay that I share this. When Guy Hammond's first wife died, while she was dying, I was there in Canada with them. And, I said to him, how are you doing? And he said, I miss her hugs. I was with her the week before she passed. And I just wanted to check in. How are you doing? He said, I miss her hugs. And it was really good to talk to him about it, right? He's now married again, but we need to talk about that kind of stuff. And we need to talk about if you've experienced any kind of violating touches. Maybe you've thought, well, no, I was never sexually molested, but you just had people, family members, maybe even in the church where a touch happened somewhere on your body and it wasn't wanted and it felt invasive. We need to talk about it. We do know that touch is vital to development. There are huge health benefits to touch. That's a whole nother presentation, but we need touch. And yet we don't even know how to talk about it. We're worried about our teenagers who are all piled on top of each other. Are they going to struggle sexually? When actually that teenage body is saying, I need touch, right? Sure, we should pay attention to how to steward our sexuality and what to do with arousal. But our bodies actually are in need of that kind of touch. I'm not going to go into much detail, by the way, on some of the other pieces on development, specifically on sexual attraction or the development of gender. I do want to encourage you, if you really like this workshop, I'll come do a whole separate one. But if you have not read Caring Beyond the Margins, like if I was in a live workshop, I'd literally ask all of you, who here has read Caring Beyond the Margins by Guy Hammond? And I usually get a certain percentage that raise their hands. And then I say, who hasn't? And I have them raise their hands. So if I was asking you that right now, if you were to be one who raised your hand saying you hadn't read it, I just want to encourage you, go get his book and read it. I also have a chapter on the development of sexual attraction in my book, Redeemed Sexuality. So development plays a big piece, right? And openly talking about it is a big part. I just had the Facts of Life talk with our son, and I can't believe what I learned. Okay, so let's make sure that we help our parents. I have a whole separate workshop. I put it on one of the last slides on how to teach your kids about sex. I would say I would love to come back and teach that one. Parents often are so uncomfortable because their parents didn't talk to them openly about sex, and they have their own background that they haven't really dealt with, right? So let's shift that in our ministries. All right, so let's look into some other pieces, not just development, but I have so much to cover, but also body image. Okay, how you feel about your body has a big impact on sexuality. your parents' comments, right? Development of breasts, mother's negative. So I hit all that. If there were dieting things, media. So let's talk about media. This is Katie Couric. The picture on the left is the actual picture. The picture on the right is what they published. And she threw a fit and said, that is not my body. And she made them retract it, right? So airbrushing is like this thing now, and it happens all the time. Let's change the shape of the jaw. Let's take the fat rolls out. Let's change the hip and change the slight coloring on the legs. Let's boost everything where we want it boosted and thin where we want it thin. Let's change the skin tone. I mean, I love this. This is an actual ad above called The Perfect Body, advertising bras and underwear. And then this was the remake, which I think is excellent, right? Media hugely impacts. I did a whole lesson, by the way, for Kyle Spears here in the States on the body. And I go into a lot more detail specifically on curvy bodies. Whether you're a white woman like myself, or you're a woman of color with a curvy body, we shame curvy bodies in our churches. And we, like somebody who's like skinny and thin wears the same pair of shorts that somebody that's curvier wears, and somebody's correcting those pairs of shorts. Somebody who's really buxom, gets shamed for that buxom look, and somebody who's flat-chested can wear whatever. We need to talk openly and honestly that we have shamed women who are shapely, or women. I have extra weight on my body. My girlfriend just teased me about it when I was holding a baby, and she said, she's got lots of cushioning for you, baby. And I'm like, I do. Like, whatever your breast size is, your body size is, we shame the body in all kinds of ways, starting in our teen ministries. But the Bible is amazing about that. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. This is actually, whatever your body type is, I'm sorry, but if you read this scripture, it still means the same thing. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. So do something with me. Everybody close your eyes. And nobody's allowed to look at the screen right now. Nobody, even if you're sitting with somebody watching this, don't look at the people around you. Close your eyes. And I want you to place your hand on the part of your body that you like the least. Place it there. And then I want you to say with me, I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Ready? I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Say it one more time with me. I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Now remove your hand. You can open your eyes. Now, personally, I don't like my fat rolls, right? So I had my hand on my stomach with my fat rolls, and you might have put it on a part of your body that you're like, right? What's fearful and wonderful about that? No, it's X, Y, and Z. The reality is, okay, my hand on that stomach, I've got my hand there right now. It's on the skin. Like, skin is amazing. Have you studied skin? Like, skin is the way it works, and the layers and all the things about how the nerves come in. I mean, it's your largest organ. It's amazing. But what we focus on is maybe the fat, right? Well, fat's amazing too. And what else is under there? Well, my liver's under here, my stomach's under here, like the stomach organ, like my kidneys. If you've ever listened to the poem, it's just gone out of my brain. Poet laureate who wrote Phenomenal Woman. Put it in the chat if you can remember her name. She died a few years ago. And she talks about my stride as I walk through the village and my swing of my hips. We need to talk positively about the body the way the Bible does, not the way our media does and the way we do, even in the church. There's this thing we do when we're at a party. It's called Fat Talk, where all the girls are sitting around and they're eating dessert and they're like, if you eat it just with your fingers, it doesn't have any calories. Or I'm going to go on a diet starting tomorrow, right? Like, we can't eat a dessert and go, this tastes so good. This is so good. I think I'll have a second. like we do this whole fat talk thing because of the fear of fat or other reasons. And that's a whole other topic. I have a whole workshop on God, women, and their bodies. I'm tapping onto a little bit of it today because it really influences the way we view and ourselves sexually. Our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made. So let's talk about the most important part for females. Okay, this is in Song of Solomon. Your breasts are like two fawns. Okay, what does that mean? Is that what your breasts look like? All right, like twin fawns of a gazelle. Oh, look how pointy. Is that what your breasts look like? May your breasts be like a cluster of grapes on the vine. Maybe your breasts look a little bit more like this. My breasts were like towers. Okay, maybe you have breasts like this. The Bible is full of all of this imagery about breasts. It's just funny, by the way. Your stature is like that of the palm, and your breasts are like clusters of fruit. I climbed the palm tree, and I got, this is talking about the lover, talking about to his beloved. I'm going to take hold of its fruit. Well, do you know what the fruit of a palm tree looks like? Maybe this is what your breasts look like. So the Bible has all kinds of things to say for women in their breasts. I think it's kind of fun, whether they're the perky, pointy ones or these long, sagging versions. The breasts are spoken of in all kinds of beautiful, funny ways in the Bible. So let's actually kind of take that from there and talk about your body. God speaks about the body super openly, right? So let's just do some anatomy and physiology. Let's go ahead and just everybody with me, say these words out loud with me. Ready? Toe, forehead, eyebrow, kneecap, teeth, kidney, throat, lungs, mouth, clitoris, vulva, penis, vagina, scrotum, breasts, semen. If you were in a big group, everybody would be going, and the sound in the room goes up when I do this live, because there's just such discomfort. Do I just say the word clitoris in a group of 200 people? And especially if I'm teaching this, and I do to mixed audiences, like when I do a singles thing, it's men and women, or if I do the whole church, it's married, single, men, women all together. And they're all saying clitoris and scrotum in the same room all together. What a thought, right? So the discomfort like goes up in the room, right? Why? For all kinds of reasons. When you talk about toe, forehead, eyebrow, they're just body parts, right? And you can talk about your toe and not get all uncomfortable, maybe, right? Or your teeth or your mouth. But to talk about the sexual parts of your body, whether it's breasts, like we just did, it was just fun and funny, we have this whole other level of discomfort talking about semen and the vagina and the penis and the vulva. But they're parts of your body. And guess what? They are fearfully and wonderfully made. You see, whatever part you touched, whatever your part of your body you're talking about, or maybe you have no positive view of your body, the scriptures say differently, that you are fearfully and wonderfully made, including in your genitals, right? We need to reclaim God's view of the body. You know, sometimes you will have, the very first time I taught on sexuality to teens, I said, they about all died. I said, hey, have you ever been listening to a song or been reading something or been watching a movie or just had a thought cross your mind and your vagina starts throbbing? And they're like, oh, I can't believe you just said that. And I'm like, so by the way, this is actually blood flow. So this is God made the body. And he got this early system. He created this early system that when you think a sexual thought, your vagina, the blood flow goes to your genitals and it creates this kind of tingling, throbbing sensation. How about when that happens to you? I'm not saying go make it happen, like go watch porn and masturbate to make it happen. I'm not saying go do that unless you're about ready to jump in bed with your husband. Like, don't go do that. But sometimes it randomly happens when you wake up and you're in a dream, a thought crosses your mind. And this is true of marrieds and singles, that it'll just randomly happen. How about the next time that happens, you say to God, you did a good job. It's still working. Glad to know. My vagina is awesome. So everybody right now, say with me, my vagina is awesome. Ready? My vagina is awesome. You might be whispering that because someone might hear you wherever you are. But the reality is, it doesn't matter what part of your body we're talking about. It was created by God, and he did a good job. So let's relearn how to think about our bodies, what to do with arousal. Actually, arousal, by the way, it's what I call the knee-jerk reaction. Arousal is the initial pulsing of the blood to the pelvic floor is controlled by the lower spine. Literally, your brain, this part of your brain doesn't even get involved initially. Like when you go to the doctor and you put one knee over the other and they take that little mallet and they hit your knee, they're checking your lower spine to make sure it works. They're checking that automatic reaction. That's actually the same area that controls the blood flow to your pelvic floor. So when it happens, say, good job, God, it's working, right? Now, once we've done that, wow, my vagina is awesome. To men, my penis is awesome, like cool. Now, what do I want to do with that arousal? That is what I call stewarding sexuality. I want to live out how God wants me to live it out I want to honor God with my body, is what Paul says, which I think is such a beautiful way to view it. I want to understand what the Bible says. I want to understand God's expectations. And then this whole thing about just say no isn't always super helpful when we're trying to pursue holiness, when we're trying to steward our sexuality. Sometimes we need a little bit of a better plan. So I'm going to walk you into that in just a moment. Just remember, you are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that includes your vagina. And for the men who ever happen to watch this lesson, their penis. Okay. We're going to come into that whole idea of stewarding sexuality in a minute, but I want to just tap into something. This is true for you, whether you're married or single or have been a lifelong single. Thank you for sharing that so openly, Claudine. Redeeming singlehood is so vital. We often make these assumptions. Since you're not having sex, if you're not supposed to be, so since you're not having sex, then you're not a sexual person, and you definitely shouldn't be talking about it. I was at the singles conference in Phoenix. It was the International Singles Conference in Phoenix, and two women were standing in front of me looking at my book, Redeem Sexuality, and on the front it says Sexuality for Campus Singles Teens. And one woman looked at it and went, ooh, and the other woman who was older said, well, they shouldn't be having any. Why does it say that? And they were both single. It's like, so this was a single woman saying to another single woman. I mean, it's kind of funny. I apologize. I've been laughing and crying, so I need to blow my nose. So we have this idea that if people aren't doing it, we shouldn't talk about it. That is not helpful, right? The thing is, we need to learn how to live out a genuine sexuality across the lifespan, whether people are in their 20s or their 60s, whether divorced and widowed and never married. This whole idea of it just switches off. I lost my husband, I got divorced, and like this whole idea of you're not thinking about it anymore. That is not the reality for some. I just did a lesson for the widows, last fall for the widows in New York City, and we talked about what they call widow's fire, which for people who aren't really even that interested in sex while they're married, and then all of a sudden their spouse dies and their body just turns on. Like we just have this like thing that it doesn't happen for somebody, or that the only time it does happen, you better talk to them about purity. The reality is living out our sexuality genuinely is such a huge need. When I was in Singapore, actually, let me talk about Sweden. I went to Sweden and I was going to do a Women's Day like we're doing today. And the older single women were like, why are we coming? We're never going to have any. So we don't, because the whole talk I was coming to do was on sexuality. Why are we coming to a lesson on sexuality? Which I totally got why they even said that. And so I said, this is what I'm going to cover. I'd really encourage them to come. I totally 100% get that thinking and that fear. And actually, I'd like to have a separate time with them, just them. So they came and they loved the whole workshop. It's similar to what we're doing today, showed all the pictures of the breasts. And then we had our own, there was about 20 of them, 15 of them. And we had the best talk about what it was like for them, that people that there's all kinds of things. Some of them, people only talked about sex when it was purity focused, but also the grief about not ever, for some of them, either never having a partner again if they've been partnered before, or never having a partner ever, or not having children if they never got married in the fellowship. I mean, there's just so much grief, and that has come up since the Singapore women brought it up to me, because they said nobody hugs us, right? And then I brought it up in Sweden, and then it came out when I was speaking in Mexico and in Ecuador and in Lebanon. They were all like, thank you for addressing this. Well, the thing is, guys, well, number one, when I was at the Orlando conference, I spoke 3 times, and I spoke to the ILC, our leadership, and I said, we need to have a Save the Males campaign in our ministry. So London, have a Save the Males campaign. We need to reach out to men to help, because there is so much grief around women not being, we're going to barely tap on dating today, but there's so much pain around this. And it also overlaps, obviously, into sexuality. So let's talk about it. Let's do something about it. I'm not kidding when I say literally have a Save the Males campaign, right? We need to take care of our single women, and we need to hug our single women, and we need to change some of our beliefs. We have this like belief that the ultimate life is the married life, and that is not biblical, by the way. We privilege marriage. I have a friend of mine, she's a widow, her husband died, and she's amazing. They were leading the teens. She's sitting in a meeting like the following year, and they're telling the parents in the teen ministry about who to go to for advice about parenting, and they name all the married couples, and they didn't name her. Now, they had led the teens. She and her husband had housed the teens, but now she's a widowed woman, and they left her name out. Now, obviously not intentionally, but there is this like bias we have that it's only married people that can do X, Y, and Z, right? And I don't even mean just around sexuality. I mean about just things. We privilege the marriage role, and we just have, the Bible doesn't, right? Paul literally is like, if you're not married, don't get married, because let me tell you, you're going to have so many problems. And we're going to look at that scripture just briefly. We don't honor singlehood. We actually literally are inhospitable to singles, and we don't honor celibacy. Let me talk about that inhospitability. On the East Coast, they have a singles conference on the beach each year. The sister that was teaching at it just recently, she said to me, yeah, I'm so excited. I'm teaching. She was going to teach on sexuality. And she said, it's the first time that they've actually had a single as the main speaker. And I was like, what? It's a singles conference, and the main speaker has always been a married person. What the heck is that, right? We don't honor singlehood, honestly. Paul, guess who wrote the most about sex in the Bible? Jesus and Paul, who were not married. We need to change the way we do things, right? For our single brothers and sisters. Whatever your reason for singlehood is, you might be lifelong single, you might be a young single, you might be a teen, you might have returned to singlehood because of widowhood or divorce. We need to change how we interact with our singles, right? Boy, I hope we get to everything tonight. We'll see how far we get. I have my awareness of I have so much to share with you in so little time. You're just going to have me back. All right, I talked about the grief and the loss, and one of the losses is the loss of dating. Somebody did ask about that. I'm not going to be able to go into that today, but we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it. So this is what Paul says in Corinthians. Those who marry, okay, this is the funniest scripture. Those who marry will face many troubles in this life, and I want to spare you. Okay. Those of you who are single, I counsel those marrieds. And they come to my workshops, and 60% of the marrieds in our fellowship, because I've actually measured it, are having many troubles. Now, the 40%, it's going okay. There's about 10% that it's going really well. We need to talk truthfully about how marriage goes, because it's hard. The church in Brazil asked this sister who is a therapist here in the States. She's Brazilian, and they asked her for their studies. This is the studies on how to become a Christian. to write a study on the truth about marriage and the problems in marriage and include it in their studies to do with people when they're studying the Bible to become a Christian. I was like, go Brazil, right? Let's be honest about what the scriptures say. Here he says that if you're married, your interests are divided, and you're not just concerned about the Lord's affairs. But someone who's single gets to be holy. Look at this, holy in both body and spirit. Now, I think we're all called to be holy in body, spirit, whether we're single or married. But you know what? Single people get to do it better because they have an undivided devotion, right? He says that this is it's even better. Look at that. It says it's better. But we privilege marriage. We need to change this in our ministries. Okay, so how do we steward sexuality across the lifespan? You may have had in your past many sexual relationships, and they may have created a lot of feelings of hurt and trauma. You may have some shame. You may have had years of struggling with pornography, and there's just a lot of emotion around it. And there's those false beliefs that I mentioned earlier, right? So let me just explain something. We tend, I'm getting past this. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to go back. We tend to think only men struggle with pornography, by the way, that we have support groups in all of our churches for men's purity, but we don't have any. And I don't use the word purity. If you've noticed that, I tend to say stewarding sexuality only because we have used the word purity in such negative ways. It's in the Bible, and I'm going to go over it in a minute. It's a good word biblically, but we've used it in ways like, so how's your purity, sister? Like it's so negative, or I'm struggling with my purity. We talk about it in such negative ways, and it's not really intended. That word isn't intended to be used that way. Or we say things. This is the funniest one. We were pure until we got married. And I'm like, oh, that's great. I hope you're still pure now that you're married. Do you hear what I'm saying? We were pure until we got married. Well, I hope you're still pure now. You can have sex and be pure. We have to change our language, right, around stewarding our sexuality. So one of the things that comes up, by the way, this kind of overlaps with the body thing. I just want to tap on it, is this whole, because we have married people in this audience, and this is an important point. We need to relearn what the Bible teaches about marital sexuality. We have taught 1 Corinthians 7 to mean all kinds of things. So I'm not quoting the whole scripture, but we use this word, it's our marital duty, and women are having sex in marriage because it's for him, and I need to do duty, and I'm not enjoying it very much, but I need to make sure I'm taking care of him. And this was mentioned earlier today, so that he doesn't struggle. So I'll have sex with him, even though I'm not getting much out of it. This is this idea of marital duty, and it is not what's in the scriptures, by the way. So what the word in 1 Corinthians 7 actually refers to is, I am so loved, therefore I. It's not a word like, it's my duty. It means I am, in other words, let's say it's a female. She feels so loved by her husband that she's like, I'd love to, right? It's not that if a woman isn't feeling that it's her fault. Often it's because she doesn't always experience her marriage as having a partner who is thoughtful and loving like that, right? Sexuality in our cultures is mostly focused on men. Just by the way, even in research, it's really hard to even find stuff about women historically because it's barely been written about. Sexuality is focused on males and male sexual functioning. We don't focus on male pleasure, women and pleasure, barely at all. And so anyway, this whole idea of they have a debt to one another, this duty isn't the words that we use in English for debt and duty or authority. She gives authority of her body over to him. Actually, it first says he gives authority of his body over to her. That word authority, exousia is the word in Greek. It doesn't mean to order someone around. It's a delegated authority, like Jesus says, God gave me authority, and so this is what I'm doing. So it's a delegated authority. You have it over your body, but your body actually isn't yours, right? Your body is the Lord's. You are supposed to be stewarding your body well. So think about it with money. God, you have money, hopefully. Whose money is it? It's God's, and you're supposed to steward it well. That's what 1 Corinthians 7 is teaching about the body, that God gave us our bodies. Well, Corinthians, Paul talks about taking care of our bodies. We're supposed to steward them well. God gave them to us. We're supposed to take care of them. And then what you do when you're married is your spouse gives you their body, and now you're supposed to steward their body well. So think about it this way. When you borrow something, how should you return it? The answer I get everywhere is in as good or better condition, right? If you borrow someone's car, you fill the gas tank and you don't crash it, you return it in as good or better condition, right? That's the idea that 1 Corinthians 7 is talking about, that the wife gives her body. It actually, by the way, says her body. If you read the Greek, it says she owns her body. This is really important. She owns her body, and then she gives her body over to him, and he's now the steward of it to what? 1 Corinthians 7, just a little bit later, says to bring her pleasure. Same thing for her. She is a steward of the body to bring it pleasure, not to order it around and say, you need to do X, Y, and Z. So ownership of the body actually is God's, but then is yours as a female. And then you give your body in marriage to each other, not to demand, but to care for. So just important to kind of relearn stewardship in marriage, right? For some of you, your past sexuality has a lot of pain. This is from the book I was talking about earlier. To those for whom sexual experience has resulted in unholy pain, Christ says, I understand well your experience. I hear the cry of the needy, afflicted, and broken. Come to me. I am your refuge. I am safe. I will remake what is broken. I will remake your joy, right? I will give you reason to trust and then to love. See, God actually, if you have either been harmed physically or there's been a betrayal in your marriage or with past partners, it's very painful. And that would be a whole nother lesson that we're not going to be able to hit today. I would say, though, go again, our deep knowing of God guards and guides our sexuality. And he promises to heal us and to bring about new things, even when there's been brokenness. And that brokenness might include, if it's a betrayal in marriage, it might include staying married. It might include not staying married, but God can bring healing. The abuse you experienced as a child, what you experienced doesn't go away, but God can bring back new things into your life. So how do we pursue and steward our sexuality? Let me tap on this before we're done tonight, before we open it up for questions. I told you I was going to go back to this idea of purity. The word actually used in Philippians is ailekrines, where he talks about pursuing purity, which I think the pursuing idea is beautiful. The word ailekrines means pure, unalloyed, unmixed, sincere, judged by sunlight. In other words, it's this beautiful thing that the sun comes lighting on. It's not, I gotta be pure. How's your purity going, right? That we are to treat the body with special honor. So this is in 1 Corinthians 12 that talks about the unpresentable parts of the body. The words special honor, the word honor is the word time, which means beyond value. Priceless, right? That means your vagina, your breasts, that means your entire body. It's precious, right? So we need to show it exceeding honor, right? I get asked a lot about modesty and how we clothe ourselves. And we'll use this, I talk about this passage. Let me tell you how we're supposed to treat our body with preeminent honor. So, You're not flashing it out there for the world to see. You're not covering it because you're ashamed of it. So you're in London. Oh, you're in London. Okay, I always talk about going to London when I talk about this scripture. So I went to see the crown jewels. Am I saying it right? And I go through, you have to go, at the time, this was like 25 years ago, I had to go through like a vault and then another vault. There was like 3-foot doors to see the jewels. And I talk about how much do they protect those precious jewels, like huge, right? That's what God's talking about how we protect our purity, how we protect our body. It is that precious to him. It is that valuable. That's the pursuit of purity, the pursuit of holiness. You know, staying pure, having sexual integrity. I like that word better even than purity. Sexual integrity can often sound like a deprivation rather than a privilege. But when we think about it, like with water, like when you think about drinking water, I have a friend from China and the water was like of the river next to her house was this sludge green. Like, would you put that in a bottle and drink it? No. We look at that water bottle and it's so gorgeously pure and clean. That's the new way we do need to rethink about sexual integrity, holiness, purity, right? That it is this beautiful opportunity and it is not just for single people, right? So pursue a new understanding of purity. The last thing that I'm going to leave you with is the whole idea. I'm going to just find the right slide here on having what I call an action plan. When you are striving for not engaging in erotic sexuality, either for whatever reason you're married and not able to engage sexually, but you're struggling, or many of you who are listening today who are single, what do you do with arousal? We talked about arousal. Vagina is awesome. Now, how do we pursue sexuality so that we're not acting it out in ways that are not honoring to God, right? With pornography, I get asked a lot about masturbation, like, is it in the Bible? Like, is it a sin in the Bible? Masturbation is not even mentioned in the Bible once, in case you're wondering. It's literally not in the scriptures. So to say, I had somebody literally who I really respect say, but Jennifer, it does say that, we shouldn't miss the mark. I'm like, but you cannot say there's a scripture that says this about masturbation. However, I do guide people in the thinking of, remember that overarching sexuality teaching is erotic sexuality. The only time it's mentioned in the scriptures, the idea of orgasmic kind of response, intercourse, what I would call erotic sexuality, the only time it's mentioned is between a man and a woman in marital relationships. Okay, that's a longer conversation for us to have here, right? I call it the overarching understanding. If it creates connection between those two people, that deep, intimate knowing, then it's a good thing. If it doesn't belong in married people, single people, anywhere. So then, if we still have sexual feelings, what do we do with them? Right? I have a whole book written on it, so I encourage you to go get it, or at least has a section on it. The Ransom Journey is written for couples, but a single person can read it. And I have a whole chapter on the action plan that I'm going to end with today. Do you need protections on your devices? Sure. Gain a godly view of sexuality. If you're struggling with lust, look at that person and consider that they are a whole person. They could be my brother, they could be my friend, they could be a student, an employee. They're not just a body. I teach this a lot to men because that's a huge thing, right? But also have a really clear plan. What are your pulls? Do you mostly have a challenge when you're bored and when you're trying to fall to sleep? Do you use have you been using sexual release to deal with your stress and anxiety? I had a young woman, she'd been married and then was divorced, and she had left the church. She came back and she said, Jennifer, I don't lust when I masturbate. So why is that wrong? We talked about the overarching understanding of sexuality in the Bible. And she said, I just use it to relax and to fall asleep, or because I'm stressed. And so we just talked about, okay, your body has become attuned, and this happens in marriage, where often a husband's body gets attuned to, I use sexuality with my married spouse when I'm stressed. And that's not God's intention, to engage in sexuality for stress and anxiety. Now, it does relieve stress and anxiety, to tell you the truth. Oxytocin floods the body, but that's not the purpose of it, right? So expand your understanding of sexuality. If you're experiencing stress and anxiety, you may want to find really helpful, beautiful ways to express, to work through your stress and anxiety. So my whole book, Redeem Sexuality, has chapters on that, right? You might be using it when you're emotional, or sometimes just for something that you're feeling you want the thrill. So have a plan for your pulls. I call it the action plan. Identify your high-risk situations. When are you most likely? And then make a plan for them. When you're stressed, not when you're stressed and you want to do pornography, but when you're stressed, what do? Put together a plan. Are you experiencing Sabbath? Do you rest? Do you take vacations with God? Do you go on walks? What's the last time that you took a bubble bath? Like, get help with stress and anxiety so that you're not using sexuality to deal with it. All right, we are done for tonight. I am going to just end here with a very final piece. Why? Why should you pursue purity and flee sexual immorality? You know what Paul says? He says, because you were bought at a price. You are invaluable. That's why. That's why. Right? Remember who you are before God. What are the words he uses to describe you? He calls you precious. He calls you beloved. He calls you treasured. He calls you chosen and jewel, an apple of his eye. This is how he feels about you. God wants to be intimately connected to us. We need to redefine who we are in his eyes, and we need to redefine him, who God is, his heart and his character, and that will guard and guide our sexuality. We need to learn from him what intimacy looks like. I wanted to get to the part on how to build intimate relationships. We didn't get there. I'd love to come do that another time, but honestly, the way you learn it is by having it first and foremost with God. And I am going to stop there. Oh, I went 10 minutes too long.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I do appreciate, as you were talking, I was laughing, I was crying. This has been amazing. And I know you haven't gone through all the slides, so probably we need to have you again, because I see so many women have commented that they have so much, that they want to have more information from you. So thank you so much. I am now opening the Slido questions, and I do want to introduce Aisha and Margot, who will also ask you the questions. Yeah, for some reason I'm trying to find
I
here.
am enjoying looking where everybody's from, because I didn't get to do that earlier. Hello, all over the world.
Hello. If Margot can come, let me spotlight.
Amy, do you want me to throw up the Slido screen?
Yes, please, thank you. So I'm gonna put Margot and I'm gonna bring Aisha, and they will take over from me. Here we go. So this is the slido.com, hashtag God and Women. And yeah, Margot and Aisha will be asking the questions.
And ladies, just a reminder, you can put questions in the chat as well. If you want to keep them private, send a direct private message to Tammy Fleming and I will pass it on.
Thank you, Tammy. Well, the first question is, how does one heal from past sexual abuse and its impact on a future or current sexual relationship?
Thank you for asking that, because I barely tapped on it. So we now know that, so we have the diagnoses for people that go to war in the military and they come home and they're having really challenging responses. We call it PTSD, right? Post-traumatic stress disorder. We actually now know that children who have been harmed multiple times or just even one time, they have what you call complex PTSD. So the symptoms are actually quite similar to PTSD. They'll have flashbacks, mood swings, they'll have a negative view, they'll avoid things. So a lot of the same symptoms will happen. And so getting good trauma care, I would always recommend, if you're going to get therapeutic care, you see somebody, you want, this wording is important, see a trauma-informed therapist. I want to really encourage you to read The Body Keeps the Score. It's a bit of a dense book written by the guru on trauma. And it really just helps explain the body and how trauma sits in the body. This is kind of what I was totally off this question, but when the trauma is in the marital relationship, either because of pornography or an affair, the body remembers it, right? And sometimes we'll say, sister, you need to forgive, whether it's a husband or a dad. Sister, you just need to forgive. You need to let that go. But actually, the trauma response is not about forgiveness. It can be intertwined because the hurt and the pain can intertwine with the working through, say, resentment or holding a record of wrongs. They can intertwine, but often we have shamed people for very real responses that their body has to trauma. So it's important that we understand trauma. Nadine Burke, Nadineburke, she is a medical doctor here in San Diego. She led the ACEs research, adult childhood experience, adverse childhood events study, where they looked at long-term exposure to abuse and neglect for children and the impact that it has on mental and emotional health. She did a TED Talk on it that was amazing and just in a quick way explains it. So first of all, understand what trauma does. I would say educate yourself on trauma. When I taught on trauma in Mexico, I did a whole women's work weekend in Mexico. I taught 5 lessons, and one of them was on trauma. 5 like of this length. Can you imagine? And the number of women coming up and just sobbing, hugging me, saying, nobody's ever explained that these responses are because of the trauma. So educating about trauma is huge, and then getting some good care, because there are different forms of treatment. EMDR is one of them. I get asked about EMDR. It can be very effective for some people, but just make sure you're asking if you're going to see somebody professionally. Trauma informed is an important word. And then go do some education, go do some learning. I would start there. And if you're in a relationship, do therapy together. It can be very helpful. I work with couples where one of them's been traumatized in their upbringing, and it's really impacting their in marriage. I get asked, should you do that before you get married? Go get help. Yeah, you should do it now. I work with many single women who have been abused or raped, and they're getting their help now because trauma impacts your life. I had a young woman who she'd been raped, and she'd been assaulted on a bus multiple times. And so she didn't know why she couldn't get on a bus, and it wasn't until she came for therapy that we worked through why she was avoiding buses. It was a very awful experience. So getting help with that is key.
Wow, thank you so much. In the absence of Aisha, I asked the next question. How does menopause affect sexuality and the ability to have sex?
And I want to answer this for all the women out there, not just the married women, because what's really fascinating is the singles actually ask the same questions that the marrieds ask. Although I have to say, not many single people ask about menopause, and they should. Menopause, not only does it affect lower desire. So what happens during menopause is your hormones go back. This is what's crazy. They go back to the hormone levels you had when you were 4. That is how strong the hormonal shift is. So what it does is it lowers testosterone. Women have testosterone. We tend to think women just have estrogen. No, men and women have all the hormones. So all the hormones lower in the body, and testosterone, the loss of testosterone thins the tissues. So does estrogen. So it changes the body. We were joking last night with my girlfriends. I'm old. When I do this with my skin, look, it stays that way. It stays sticking out. It's the weirdest thing. So the skin thins, elasticity changes. So what can happen is for some women, pain increases because during the thrusting of intercourse, so as the vagina is entering the penis, God made the vagina, God made the penis. If you're single or married, that's how intercourse happens. The penis enters the vagina. So I'm talking to married and single women here. When a penis enters the vagina and menopause has happened, sometimes the dryness of the tissues makes that friction painful. Also, so that can lower desire, but also lower testosterone can, for some women, lower desire levels. So when women are having hormone replacement therapy, HRT, and they go on testosterone, estrogen, and progestin, sometimes their desire levels will kick in or go crazy. That's only a percentage of women though. People ask me, should I take testosterone to help with it? There is a medication called, oh no, for sexual desire. It's very controversial. Should you take a pill for, it's called the blue pill. Sorry, it's called the pink pill. I work with the researcher on it and it's just left my brain. It only got approved. It was the first time that the American FDA approved a medication for women was 6 years ago. They had to sue the FDA. Anyway, flibanserin. Flibanserin is actually for sexual desire and it works quite well for some women, but there's a real controversy about it, like who wants to take a pill to overcome desire. Sometimes desire isn't there because you haven't had orgasms very often. And so increasing arousal and enjoyment. So that's the biggest thing I focus on in providing sex therapy is increasing enjoyment in the marital relationship. That will often also affect desire. But the reality is married women past the childbearing years 70% of married women past the childbearing years don't experience desire first. So they don't actually feel desire. Ooh, I want to have sex during the day. But if they're in a good, loving relationship and touch starts, then desire kicks in. It's called responsive desire. That's a whole marital workshop. There you go. Majority of women don't feel it beforehand.
Okay.
Doesn't mean they can't have good sexual relationship.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. And how should single women deal with their sexual desire?
So obviously in this workshop, I gave you some really clear ideas, like number one, going, well, my body works. I can literally feel it, right? Honor the body. Go, God, you made a great body. The part I did not go a ton into, unfortunately, is what I call embodied living. Go. I really highly recommend Matthew Anderson's Earthen Vessels. I love his book. I'm writing a book on the body right now. I'm sorry, it's not ready yet. So one of the biggest ways to deal with sexual desire is live richly and fully in the body that you're in. Like, when's the last time you turned on the music and danced? When have you been with friends and danced? When's the last time you threw yourself into, it's London, it's cold there, but into warmer waters and swam? Like I live by the ocean. Do you know how many Californians don't get in the water and don't feel the water against their skin? Rivers, I'm like, feel the water against your skin, go hiking. By the way, if you want to make sure to mute yourself. So live richly in the body, go dancing, go hug each other, go on live richly, go build stuff. Yeah, I live in Tijuana. I always say, go build a house in Tijuana. I live just north of Tijuana, excuse me. And so do things that are like, check, are you doing yoga? Are you living well? Have you taken a tap class recently? Go take ballroom dancing. Like, live well in the body that you're in, have deep, intimate relationships. The biggest thing that we realize is that people, when they feel sexual desire, think it means they need a sexual release. But actually, that's just because that's a path that they've gone down a lot. This is true for married people. When sometimes that sexual desire is more of a signal from your body that you're needing connection. So reach out for deep, intimate, emotional connection with people. And I made a mistake when I wrote Redeemed Sexuality. I didn't include the chapters on verbal and emotional intimacy that are in The Art of Intimate Marriage. I'm going to redo, actually, in a couple months, the new Redeemed Sexuality will come out and it will have those chapters in it. I apologize because they should have been in there, because having deep, intimate relationships are very vital to stewarding your sexual desire. I would say the first thing is honor your body and say, God, you did a good job, and then go live richly in your body.
So, okay, shall we make this next question the last question?
We can do whatever you need to do timing wise. I have 7 more minutes. Whatever timing you want, I'm here.
Okay. Have you come across PND or PND, prudential nerve dysfunction, persistent arousal condition, traumatic nightmares, protection of self from sexual penetration in dreams?
Yeah, so in the States, that's cool that you're calling it pudendal nerve dysfunction. It's called PGAD, persistent genital arousal disorder. It's not in the DSM, the Diagnostic Manual for Mental Health. It should be. And it is now known to probably be a pain syndrome. We're still learning about it, where people have what you call unwanted intrusive desire. And it's really, really distressing for people, where their vagina, their penis becomes aroused, either erect. By the way, female vaginas become erect. When blood flow comes in, it also creates an erectile response in the vulva. And it's very distressing. People try to do masturbation to get rid of it, and it doesn't make it go away. And sometimes you can end up with lacerated tissues because someone is regularly trying to make it go away with stimulation, self-stimulation. But they have learned more. This is a very short answer to a really important question. PGAD, or PND here, it has a high suicide rate. It's that distressing. People can't wear underwear. They can't sit. They can't drive in a car. It's very distressing, both emotionally. They feel a lot of shame and guilt because people have said things they shouldn't say, like they think it's sin. It is treatable in a lot of different ways. They can use nerve blocks. They can use a numbing cream, a TENS unit, TENS. This is a longer, by the way, my email address. I'm going to answer all the questions you've sent in, by the way. I told them that any of that I don't answer today, I'm going to type out answers to, and they're going to send it to all of you. So I'll get to all of them. But go read When Sex Hurts by Irwin Goldstein, and that's for married people, non-married, doesn't matter who it is. It includes a PGAD section and about some of the treatments for PGAD. Sometimes it's because people have an impinged nerve in their spine, or they have cysts in their spine. So go find out from a specialist what's causing it. It is hard to treat. The biggest help is from a pelvic floor therapist who specializes in sexual pain. So a pelvic floor therapist, they have them in England and in various parts of the world. Pelvic floor therapist who specializes in sexual pain. That's where you want to get the medical care. Oh, there's so much more we had to talk about.
There is indeed so much more. Thank you so much for answering just some of the questions. And to be honest, I'm so grateful that you said there at the end that the questions that haven't been answered this evening, you can answer. I will archive all of the questions so that none of them would be lost. And Jennifer promises, and is recorded, that she will answer all of these questions. Thank you so much once again, Jennifer.
And this is my email address. Anybody can send to that email address, just asking me questions. My name, Jennifer Konzen @yahoo.com.
Great. Thank you so much. I do appreciate you coming and making time to come to us tonight. And thank you once again, everyone else, for joining. Tammy will share another slide as we finish now, are some of the books that Dr. Jennifer Konzen had written. And she also alluded to some of the books. And when we will send the recording, we will try to put the books there as well. So once again, thank you so much. I do appreciate. This is our slide. This is our Instagram, our YouTube channel. Please follow us on Instagram. Once again, thank you so much for coming. And these are the books. These are the books: Redeem Sexuality, The Art of Intimate Marriage, and actually your website, Jennifer, is also there, theartofintimatemarriage.com. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great evening or afternoon. Thank you so much.